Ian Paice was always there. He stayed with Deep Purple even though they had changed singers, guitarists, factions, reunions, and breakups like a game of dominoes over decades. Like the engine of a gigantic machine that never stopped operating, he silently kept the band's heartbeat steady while sitting behind the drums, saying little and requiring no rebellion. The record covers did not include him as the star. He did not start the scandal. No guitar burning, no public arguments, no hotel room destruction. However, this man with the round glasses and the unwavering rhythm was the final performer for Deep Purple and the only member to appear on all of the band's albums from 1968 to the present. Ian Paice took a different route in an age of drummers who were all about speed, flash, and thunder. Endurance, accuracy, and elegance. A silent hero of sorts. A person who made the rock world bow its head without the need for publicity. Come along as we tell the tale of a drummer who actually hammered history into reality and of a special kind of loyalty in the turbulent world of music. Early years. Ian Anderson Paice was born in Nottingham, England, on June 29, 1948, into a working-class family that didn't dare to dream yet liked music. To provide for the family, his father, a pianist who had previously sought a career, gave up playing the instrument. As a musician with responsibilities, he performed at pubs and gigs on the weekends to supplement his income. But maybe it was because of that sacrifice that he was able to see the flame of passion glowing in his son's eyes. Ian Paice never envisioned himself as a rock star as a kid. He held a violin instead of a drum as his first instrument. He started learning to play it at a young age because it was the only instrument in the house. However, something felt off. He was not interested in playing the violin. He desired to strike it. Melodies that flowed were not appealing to the boy. He yearned for something strong, explosive, and mechanical. A way to communicate without using words. Ian once remarked, laughing, "I soon discovered that I preferred hitting the violin over playing it." It was not a music textbook that sparked that passion. It was inspired by the black and white movies of the heyday of Hollywood. Ian stood in front of the TV on several restless nights, enthralled with the image of black drummers and smoky bar scenes, playing as if every hit were their last. It was more than sound. It was a picture. Motion. Instinct, something unadulterated and genuine. The child started making his own drums out of whatever he could find when he was 11 years old. Metal boxes, scrap wood, old biscuit tins, and pot lids were all turned into tools. To make drumsticks, he pilfered his mother's knitting needles. There was only the rhythm in his brain and his hands that wouldn't stop moving, no teachers, no practice spaces, no obvious route. It was an inexplicable urge rather than rebellion. "This is how I exist," something inside him said. No one in the family initially gave it any thought. They believed it to be a phase. However, after Ian drummed every day for 3 years without stopping or getting bored, his father realized that this wasn't a pastime. It was a vocation. In order to give Ian his first genuine drum equipment, he spent £32, which was a significant amount at the time, on a glittering red set. However, dreams aren't always as bright as they seem. The inexpensive kit keeps breaking. Ian detested the sound since it was so terrible. He didn't give up, though. Never. He persisted in learning how to control the noise, transform it into rhythm, and make each blow convey a message. At that point, music became his lifeblood, a sensation he has carried with him ever since. Early career. When Ian Paice was still a teenager, he started playing drums professionally. There were no textbooks or schools. His instincts, his ears, and innumerable hours of solo practice till his hands were raw were the sources of everything. Ian tried to imitate the intricacy of swing rhythms and the freedom and the flowing strokes of Gene Krupa, Buddy Rich, and Louis Bellson when he played along to old jazz records while others studied theory. All of them served as his instructors via tape and vinyl. He entered the real world of music at the age of 16. The Shindigs were his first band, and they played anywhere that paid, including fairs, clubs, and weddings. He picked up skills like crowd reading, time management, and blending in without being overbearing there. Those were the cornerstones of survival for a drummer. Ian soon joined the beat group MI5, which was primarily active in Europe before changing its name to the Maze. Traveling Germany, France, and Belgium while performing current pop rock. Even though the Maze was a minor name in the huge ocean of music from the 1960s, Ian met Rod Evans there, who would eventually introduce him to Deep Purple. Despite the Maze's few failed singles, Ian considered those years to be his real college. He gained skills in road survival, teamwork, overcoming grueling tour schedules, and accepting failure. Ian Paice was a touring drummer across Europe at the age of 18, while most people his age were still figuring things out. He was working hard to establish himself in a musical environment that was changing quickly. Then, one evening, came in the most surprising manner. The lead vocalist of the Maze, Rod Evans, made the decision to try out for a new band called Roundabout, which would soon become Deep Purple. The band's drummer, Bobby Woodman, was dissatisfied with the group's direction and showed little interest when Paice turned up as a buddy without any plans to audition. Paice was asked to fill in when Woodman left in the middle of the auction. Pick up the sticks and play like he always did, no planning, no practice. Ritchie Blackmore would subsequently characterize what he's seen in that instant as even if the world collapses around me. And it started like that. Not on the Wembley stage, not with $1 million deal, but in a seedy London rehearsal space with a 19-year-old drummer playing as if every beat were his last. The journey with Deep Purple. Ian Paice didn't sound like a band auditionee from the first time he tried out for Deep Purple. He performed as though he had been a part of it long before the word was coined. One of the most exacting guitarists in Britain, Ritchie Blackmore, immediately nodded. Blackmore subsequently remarked, "You can't ignore the pull of his groove, but he's not flashy." Deep Purple, a band of outcasts no one anticipated would succeed, came into being in 1968. Rod Evans, the main singer, John Lord, who has a classical flair, Ritchie Blackmore, who plays a powerful guitar, and Ian Paice, who isn't quite 20, who plays the drums. Ian Paice is the only member the band could replace. Deep Purple emerged from the psychedelic haze with the publication of N-Rock in 1970, helping to shape the future of British hard rock. They created the fabled Golden Triangle with Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath. However, tempo was something that set Deep Purple apart from the other two. Drums were not a background element that he played. Following the vocalist, he performed as if he were a second storyteller. Cymbals that fall only a half-second slower during the breakdown in the middle of the eerie, blood-soaked ballad Child in Time constrict the entire room like a noose. It was no coincidence. It was the ability to time someone's drumming so that it matched the listener's heartbeat. Paice made a significant technical advancement with Fireball in 1971. Since one pedal wasn't strong enough, Keith Moon's bass drum was borrowed in the studio to create the first double bass drum intro in hard rock history. Fireball's thundering opening didn't only rip through the atmosphere. It was the beginning of a new era in which emotion, power, and speed were all combined. Machine Head's hits, including Smoke on the Water, Highway Star, and Space Truckin', became textbooks in 1972. However, you had to listen to the live album made in Japan that year in order to comprehend what kept Deep Purple alive. Ian Paice played a drum solo for more than 10 minutes on it. There was no flair or showboating, just rhythm that fell like the heavy breath of a gigantic machine. That beat would follow you around all night long, even if you forgot the lyrics or the guitar chords. Deep Purple started to fall apart in 1973. Roger Glover and Ian Gillan departed. Glenn Hughes and David Coverdale joined. After becoming irritated, Ritchie Blackmore founded Rainbow. He was succeeded by Tommy Bolin, who later passed away from a heroin overdose. Deep Purple lost its course and changed commanders, becoming a ship adrift. However, Ian Paice remained constant throughout. Not because there was nothing else he could do. Whitesnake called out. He was wanted by Gary Moore. Paul McCartney also required a drummer. However, Ian Paice stayed because he felt that he was the only person who could maintain the band's energy. He also did it in silence. No ego games, no claims, no arguments. He sat behind the drum kit, where no one looked, in an era when everyone yelled to be noticed. But if he stopped, everything fell apart. The Mark II lineup got back together in 1984. Nobody had high expectations, but Perfect Strangers was a huge hit not because of nostalgia, but because the band had rediscovering its passion, which was still pulsing in Ian Paice's songs. From then on, it has been Whoosh, Now What, Perpendicular, or The Battle Rages On. Deep Purple has continued to tour the world and create music. And Paice continues to play 2-hour sets every night while sitting behind the kit, even in his 70s. For the first time ever, he had to cancel gigs in 2016 due to a small stroke. Perhaps it's time to stop, some thought, but a month later he was back on stage, still Ian Paice, still the heartbeat. From Silence to Smoke on the Lake, from Fireball to Vincent Price, one thing has remained constant in the hearts of devotees. That drum rhythm remains Deep Purple's indelible essence. Personal life: Ian Paice discreetly made a different decision than many rock stars of his day, who were preoccupied by drugs, sex, scandals, and million-dollar divorces. No headlines, no spotlights, and no justifications. Simply a nice, quiet, and complete life. Similar to his drumming, which was always steady but never showy. he wed Jackie Paice, who had been his companion since the beginning of his career. The Deep Purple family is familiar with Jackie, which is amazing. She is the twin sister of Ian's best friend and co-founder of Deep Purple, Vicki Lord, who was married to the late John Lord. These two parallel marriages were often characterized as the constant heartbeats that prevented Deep Purple from disintegrating entirely in a world where the band frequently broke up and battled. James, Emmy, and Callie are his 3 children with Jackie. However, Paice concealed all information about his kids from the public, in contrast to many rock celebrity families. No tabloid articles, no speculations, no family pictures on the internet. He never featured his children on magazine covers. He brought them to school. A straightforward decision that made a big impression. Although Ian Paice never professed to be a moral role model, he quietly led an honest, consistent, and non-disruptive life that many in the profession find admirable. The most tangible way, he once said. They were co-founders of Sunflower Jam, a non-profit organization that supports alternative non-invasive therapies and raises money for kids with cancer, in 2006. Prominent figures including Paul Weller, Bruce Dickinson, Brian May, and Robert Plant have attended the gatherings. Paice continued to play drums every night as other drummers vanished into the spotlight of the stage. Then working with his wife on charitable projects in the mornings before retiring calmly to their modest English rural home, where the only sounds were the rustle of leaves in the backyard and the laughter of children. Although it isn't a particularly noteworthy tale, it is what sets Ian Paice apart in the ridiculous realm of rock and roll. To become a legend, he didn't have to revolt. All he had to do was be himself. Present life at a time when the majority of great drummers have either retired, faded into solitude, or are only shadows of their former selves, Ian Paice continues to perform for Deep Purple night after night while sitting behind the drum kit, as he has done for more than 50 years. He no longer leaps during sets like he did during the Made in Japan era at the age of 76. However, his drumming has remained strong. Conversely, it has gotten heavier and tighter. And more sentimental than before. Speed is no longer the technique's goal. It now exudes complete control, the kind that can only be developed with millions of strikes and thousands of tour nights. As Paice once remarked, "I no longer play to prove anything. To feel it, I play." Many people believed he might retire when he experienced his first significant setback as a musician in 2016, a mild stroke. However, no. As if nothing had happened, he took the stage again a month later. Paice became the indispensable focal point of Deep Purple's ongoing global tours and album releases. When whoosh! Turning to crime in 2020. When 2021 was announced, fans exhaled in relief. Paice was still here, as was the band. His constant presence became a representation of fortitude, devotion, and the resolve to persevere in a post-pandemic world where everything seemed uncertain. He doesn't do podcasts, live streaming, or social media. All he does is go on stage and play the drums, night after night. However, he periodically makes an appearance at fan gatherings and drum clinics where he teaches methods, balance advice, and how to take care of hands that have been drumming for more than 50 years. Just an experienced craftsman transferring the torch to the next generation, no lecturing, no arrogance. In 2024, Deep Purple began a massive tour called Equals One More Time, which began in the United States in August. They co-headlined with Yes, a legendary band from Prague, which was an unexpected but oddly ideal combination. It was a living declaration, not just a tour. Ian Paice continues to be the lifeblood of classic hard rock, which is still vibrant and powerful. Fans traveled to big cities like Camden, Homedale, Saratoga Springs, Wantagh, and Bethel for the tour, not only to relive their childhood memories but also to experience the distinctive pulse of Paice's drumming, tight, clean, and never off by a beat. That November, Deep Purple performed in their hometown of London at the O2 Arena. It was a legendary night. With his silver hair, round glasses, and kind smile, Ian Paice performed on a large platform as though it were still the Machine Head era. Following each solo, the roughly 20,000 fans gave him standing ovations. Paice and Deep Purple revealed plans for a new studio album and another world tour that would last until 2026 and early 2025, rather than taking a break after a lengthy tour. "We don't see any reason to quit," Paice stated in an hour-long podcast with Rob Cass. "As long as the drums keep beating, we'll keep going." New tour dates are being announced. Sao Paulo, Brazil, Tbilisi, Georgia, Dubai, UAE. Proof that their music isn't just alive in the West, but thriving worldwide. And on every one of those stages, the one man who's kept the rhythm since day one will still be in his rightful place. Ian Paice. Beyond performing, he continues to engage through drum clinics, podcasts, and Q&A sessions, where he shares not just drumming skills, but his philosophy of life, endurance, humility, and unwavering loyalty to music. No one calls him an inspiration, yet every time he strikes the drum, a new generation quietly learns something, without a word spoken. Today, Ian Paice lives with his wife in England. In a home not far from London, close to nature and far from noise. He spends his time with family, supports charity through the Sunflower Jam, occasionally visits the studio, or prepares for the next tour. And every time Deep Purple takes the stage, whether in Tokyo, Munich, or Buenos Aires, fans know one thing for certain. That beat will come in, right on time, never late. Because Ian Paice never stops. And he has no intention of ever doing so. Legacy and influence. In the world of rock, where names often echo with scandal, controversy and rebellion, Ian Paice built his legacy through precision, consistency and silence. He didn't need to shout to prove himself. He didn't need to break every boundary to get noticed. He simply stayed in time for over half a century. To drummers, the name Ian Paice is synonymous with speed, control, and a swing-infused jazz feel woven into the heart of heavy rock. He is one of the very few left-handed drummers to play on a left-handed kit, yet he never sounded offbeat. On the contrary, it gave birth to a rhythm that was uniquely his own, with deliberate delay and emotional accents no one else could replicate. Paice doesn't play drums like a boxer. He plays like a sculptor. Carving space with rhythm, his double bass work on tracks like Fireball, Space Truckin', or even the long silences in Child in Time all reveal one thing. He doesn't play to sound good, he plays to move people. At his peak, Paice's single-stroke technique was compared to jazz icon Buddy Rich. He could deliver 8 double strokes per hand per second with a single pedal, something only drummers like Dave Lombardo or Mike Mangini dare dream of. But Ian Paice isn't just Deep Purple's drummer. He's a direct inspiration to later icons. Lars Ulrich, Metallica, once said Paice was the reason he picked up the drums. Chad Smith, Red Hot Chili Peppers, learned spatial awareness from watching him. Joey Jordison, Slipknot, called him the definitive rock drummer of all time. He doesn't belong to a movement. He doesn't top flashy lists. Paice is the drummer real drummers study when they want to learn how to master the strike. Throughout 55 years of performing, no one has ever seen Ian Paice involved in a public feud. While Deep Purple weathered endless lineup changes, open rifts, and verbal battles among Gillan, Blackmore, Coverdale, Hughes, Paice remained the one man who never spoke ill of anyone. He didn't pick sides. He didn't form cliques. He never retaliated through the media, he just kept playing. To fans, he is a legend. To his bandmates, he is the unwavering anchor. To the world of rock, he is living proof that you can be great without sacrificing your dignity. Ian Paice's legacy doesn't lie in any single album. Not just in Smoke on the Water, Burn, or Perfect Strangers. It lies in 56 uninterrupted years. Over 3,000 live shows, never missing a beat. It lies in this. When people ask, who is Deep Purple, there are many answers. But when they ask, who never left, there is only one. Ian Paice. He's not the first name you hear when people talk about rock, but he's the one who never disappeared. A symbol who never needed to be called a symbol. A legend who never had to claim the title. Through silence, endurance, and millisecond perfect precision, Ian Paice built one of the most quietly powerful musical legacies of our time. In an era rushing and roaring toward noise, Paice teaches us this. Some greatness doesn't need to explode. Some great people simply never fall out of rhythm. And when the final spotlight dims, what remains won't be scandal or media chaos. It will be the steady beat, persistent, loyal on time, just like the life he lived. Ian Paice, the last timekeeper, and perhaps the last to truly keep himself. Do you find yourself holding your breath when the drums and Smoke on the Water begin? Do you believe the greatest artist is the one who keeps rhythm so others can shine? Share your thoughts on Ian Paice or tell us, who is the timekeeper in your life? Leave a comment below. Share this piece if it moved you. And remember, music never dies. As long as there are hearts like his keeping the beat.